Hello, YouTube viewers. Thanks for coming back, and thanks for clicking. I just wanted to speak today, if you'll entertain a couple of topics, about struggle and the other re-engaging. Regarding struggle and learning, remember we live in a repetition of actions. Its echoes, its consequences, its dark fears, and sometimes its wishful regrets. Lessons I've found come plentiful and come easy, and usually they're forgotten quite quickly. They're usually lessons with the path of least resistance that we take, and yet they're building blocks to all of our yet to come difficult lessons. These difficult lessons are the ones that we do not forget so easily. They hurt. They stick around into the hazy early morning hours sometimes, and they can include ways we've treated others or the way we've treated ourselves. Regarding struggle and regret. Regret for regret's sake is quite crippling, especially if you're a sensitive soul. The hardest part is trying to, when you're quantifying, trying to make sense of, trying to ordinate the overall significance within the big picture of what you've done. And then hopefully draw a big enough lesson or building block out of it that will carry you forward into your future lessons. And with fear of the unknown. Should I do this? Should I do that? What if you don't decide at all? Is that tolerable? Will it end up being a big waste of your effort? Will it end up just being boring? Fear for the sake of fear's sake is itself paralyzing. It's forcing you to overthink every step, every contingency. Truth is, even if the best laid plan is thought out, it's quite useless unless you execute it, put it into action. So you got to ask yourself, are you preemptively shooting down any success that you might have, even before having a chance to birth that plan, that solution? Will you die and go away if it fails? Most likely not. And isn't the knowledge that you come across, that you discover, even if there's failure, doesn't that inform you on something not to try next time? Or you could try one more time just to verify, but doesn't it also teach you what not to try, what doesn't work? Isn't that just as valuable? And failure is merely also communication that we're not ready. Maybe our plan wasn't well thought through enough. Maybe you were overlooking an important factor in order to find success. If you're going to be a true scientist or an inventor, or even a business mogul, know that you've got to be able to deal with failure. Failure to get your desired result, your desired product, solution. And you can't continually travel back into your childhood to always blame some bad person or a bad result, an end result that forced you to become something that you don't like or don't want to be. Struggle is, I think, where our past meets our failure up to that point. It's the crossroads of where comfort meets learning, maturity over stagnation. Sometimes struggle comes in a huge, overwhelming package that kicks you right square in the goalpost. But how much of it is there to challenge you, and how much is too much of a challenge at some time, at some point? And when hope dies and leaves you just deceased on the battlefield, how do you pick yourself up? Most of the time, hope will get you out of deep situations, so long as you can still envision a path. Sadly, when you're confronted by some cold realities that offer no path, no hope, your path that remains can become quite bleak very quickly. The worst part is not knowing. Not knowing can kill you. You can become inundated with emotions of limitation, pessimism, despair, and full of fears of ending. Now, we may be fortunate enough to be surrounded by things like the best physical rehab therapists, neuroscientists, neurosurgeons, or vascular surgeons. But if you still ain't right in your head, and you don't know where to go next, you're a goner. Suppose if you only get back part of the way from where you all started out at. Suppose if you aren't grateful enough not to be in such a much worse position than you could be. And then what if you start actually feeling guilty about your level of recovery, return, and yet you still have the audacity to feel moments of despair? Isn't that super selfish in the bigger picture of life? There are countless children in children's hospitals that will never get the knowledge or the privilege of that which you were previously blessed to have had. You feel that is selfish in the big picture, feeling the way you do. Emotions duplicate and multiply by the dozens when you delve into despair messaging. What if unhealed notions of persecution by God overtake your recovery? What if you decide just to throw in the towel? And what of resentment of your plight? What if emotion totally overclouds your big picture, your strategizing and healing plan, and you're overridden with emotion? Even Hercules would submit either to defeat or either to alcoholism, to chemical addiction, porn addiction nowadays, all to feel less of that loss and pain and disappointment. That process can be concluded quickly and permanently, or maybe tortuously over a number of years. And usually it comes to two ends: life or change in lifestyle, and a continuing survival mode. Something has to give. Giving up that perpetual grief, or there's that old savior of aging called sense of mortality, which we will all get to someday, by the way, some earlier than others. So, on re-engaging, after your life has totally gone to crap, you're left with a dichotomy, a fork in the road. Life as you knew it is now totally unsustainable, painful, and deeply unfulfilling. It's all over now. There's no going back into the past. Reality is what it is now. Over is over, and by the way, you're also older. Nobody gets younger. Do you just fake it until you die? Is life still doable? Or is it unfulfilling? Life is, after all, so much different than your memories of what it used to be, that salvaging and repurposing of it all is all that you have left. And you can salvage with bitterness and desperation, or you can try keeping your status quo of hope. I recall I was fortunate enough to have a senior physio rehab therapist, and he was an ex-army chap who's pretty much encapsulated my paralysis problem in one powerful Zen Buddhist kind of memory riddle. He asked, "So where are you going to go from here? Are you feeling sorry about your plight? Are you going to just give up and quit?" Now, it seemed quite mercenary at the time to say something like that to me at the end of my physio session, given my emotional state of the day. And his bedside psychiatry was probably not one of his stronger points. But he saw someone who was quite capable of taking a wake-up jab to my solar plexus in order to get me grasping and gasping for air once again. He knew enough to get me re-engaged either out of anger or a renewed stubbornness. Thank God for you, Chris. That painful wake-up jab got me back to a line of status quo. At least once again. I was no longer in a life or death struggle, survival mode. My rehab progress would be what it would be, like it or not. But at least now, I was engaged in healing as much as I could do it. I realized the progress in my progress that I wasn't relegated to my wheelchair anymore. I was upward standing and walking with cane and with a wheeled walker. So I should be grateful for what I still have at that point. And I realized my re-engagement plan wasn't 100% dark. It was far from the life I used to lead, but it wasn't entirely dismal. And you have to accept what is not going to come back. So, I struggled with that for years. It was hard to accept and normalize. And I knew that there was going to be some changes to my social life. Isolation from romantic relationships, isolation from past friends and activities and interests, isolation from my past career, and again that last lifestyle, which I really adored, but I just couldn't physically carry on any longer. I have to say goodbye to the things that used to involve my movement, my mobility, and line of work. I would have to finally relegate myself to a career in a sedentary desk job. And I found a new sense of shame. Shame that was pointing out I wasn't as young or even as appealing as I used to be. Infirmity does not usually attract people, especially if they become aware or become scared about even taking care of themselves as they get older. There were certain avenues of intimacy that were gone forever for me. And therapist Chris gave me what I needed to reorganize my life. Was I going to cry and sulk? Or was I going to make the best of what I had remaining on this planet, the life on this planet? I was only 44 years old at the time. I still had a hell of a lot of natural life to go. Was I going to be miserable for the next 20 or plus years? Was I going to accept where I was and move on with some optimism? In my new career, I found my desk job was provided for me, thankfully. However, there were workers and there were so-called managers that were less than enthusiastic about my being there. They resented my aptitude, the lack in aptitude at the job. And everybody starts off at a job at some place with something to learn. However, I don't know if it was my physical presentation, something inside them that was threatened by the reality. Perhaps it was their future. I don't know what they were fearing or aggressive about. But that led to my new hell, my next hell. It was replaced. My physical hell was replaced by my new vocational hell. But I felt I was better equipped to deal with this based on the great people, the wise people that I came across up to that point. And thank God my new career was more academically based, less physical based, although I did enjoy my previous career. You can't go back. You don't get younger, you get older. And I wasn't going to let anyone kneecap me into despondence or back into my spiritual abyss, which I just barely survived, emotionally and otherwise. What could be worse than paralysis, right? I managed to walk with a rollator. Only stairs would be the bane of my existence now. I realized I was reasonably intelligent, reasonably sentient, highly intuitive, and I caught on to the office game and the office politics quite effectively. I then eventually met up with the right peers, became quite efficient in my role. Thank God. He re-emerged me back into a more productive lifestyle where I he and circumstance moved me back into a productive lifestyle where I can support myself financially, socially, and mentally again. The only item remaining is probably something that is true of all older folks as you get older. Your love life. Love for another, love for yourself as a human being. That can be a bit of a handicap. But I think once you stop and sit, let life pass you by if it needs to pass you by quickly, stop, drop, and listen. You are enough. You are whole. You have intelligence. You have something to offer. Not everybody's on the same page. Not everybody's at the same speed. Maybe don't consider it a handicap. Consider it a gift. And a lot of people are not capable of receiving gifts. They may not be able to give it to themselves, let alone to another. So take stock in those things in life that you're going to consider a handicap. They can be the most character building challenges. If you don't want to look at it as a handicap, look at it as an alternate perspective that you, whether you've been forced to live in that perspective, whether you choose, make the best of where you are. Realize the mistakes, all the mistakes you've done in your life, don't repeat them. Make new ones. Learn new skills, and you're going to be fine. Trust in yourself. Be nice to one another. God bless. Thank you for listening.